Welcome back to English Through Stories. I'm Elio.
And I'm Maya. Today, I genuinely debated whether I could get through this episode without cringing at least once on behalf of myself. Because today's topic is something so specific, so universal, so deeply personal to anyone who has ever operated in a second language that I think most of our listeners are going to feel it somewhere in their body before we even get to the story.
That is a bold opening statement.
I stand by it, because today we're talking about the smile, the nod, the yes, of course, absolutely, that comes out of your mouth when your brain is actually saying, I have no idea what this person just said to me.
Oh, yeah.
You know exactly what I'm talking about.
Everyone who has ever learned a second language knows exactly what you're talking about.
It happens so fast. Someone says something, you catch about 60% of it, maybe 70, and your brain fills in what it thinks the rest probably was, and your face does the thing it does when it wants to seem like a competent, attentive, socially functional human being. And you smile. You nod. You say, of course, or sure, or absolutely. And inside, you are thinking, please, please, please do not ask me any follow-up questions.
The silent prayer.
The silent prayer. And usually, it's fine. You got enough of it, your guess was close enough, life moves on. But sometimes, what you nodded to was not what you thought you nodded to. And the gap between what you agreed to and what was actually happening doesn't reveal itself until a moment when the gap is very, very difficult to hide.
And today's story is about exactly one of those moments.
Her name is Amara, and Amara is someone I think a lot of our listeners will feel immediately, because she is not careless, she is not unaware, she is not someone who doesn't try. She is someone who tried very hard in exactly the wrong direction for just a little too long.
And the English mistake at the center of today's story is one that I think will make total sense once we explain it. And like most of the best language mistakes, it's one where you can see very clearly how a thoughtful and intelligent person arrived at exactly the wrong conclusion.
All right, I've been sitting with this story since Eliel told it to me, and I have thoughts. But first, narrator, take it away.
A soft, warm music rises gently, then settles underneath the narration. Her name was Amara Bekele, 28 years old, originally from Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and for the past 5 months a junior marketing coordinator at a mid-sized brand agency in Toronto called Northfield Creative. 5 months is an interesting length of time, long enough that people have stopped introducing you as new, but short enough that you are still, in most ways that count, figuring out where the edges are, where the invisible lines are drawn, which conversations are genuinely open and which ones have already been decided. What people mean when they say, just let me know, which could mean, please actually let me know, or it could mean, I'm being polite and do not require follow-up. Amara was a careful observer. She had always been a careful observer. It was one of the things that made her good at marketing, at reading what people wanted before they said it, at noticing the small signals that told you something before the words did. In Amara's first language, Amharic, she was attuned. She caught things. She read rooms with the ease of someone who had been doing it her whole life. In English, the instruments were all slightly recalibrated. Her English was genuinely good. She had studied it for years, used it professionally, passed the language requirements for her work permit without any difficulty. She could write a campaign brief that her creative director called sharp on her 3rd week. She could present ideas in a team meeting with clarity and confidence. She could email clients with a warmth and professionalism that read, to most people's eyes, as entirely native. But spoken English, fast, casual, idiomatic, in-the-moment spoken English, had textures she was still mapping, especially in meetings, especially when 3 or 4 people were talking at once and the conversation moved in the particular rapid elliptical way that comfortable colleagues talk, shortcutting the parts they don't need to say because they already share the context that makes those parts obvious. Amara did not always share the context, and so she had developed, over 5 months, a coping strategy. It was not a strategy she had consciously designed. It had emerged slowly, from necessity, the way most coping strategies do, as a response to the specific discomfort of sitting in a fast-moving conversation and feeling the understanding slip just slightly out of reach. The strategy was this. When she was not completely certain what had just been said, or what it meant, or whether a response was required of her, she smiled. She nodded. She produced from the part of herself that had been socialized since childhood to be gracious and present in conversation an expression of warm and attentive agreement. It worked, or it appeared to work. People moved on. The conversation continued. Nobody seemed to notice. What Amara did not realize, could not have known from the inside, was that the strategy, while it successfully prevented any single moment of visible confusion, was quietly building a kind of invisible debt. Because every time you smile and nod instead of asking, the gap between what you understand and what is actually happening grows a little wider. And gaps, in her experience, had a way of holding steady for a long time and then appearing all at once. The specific moment it appeared was a Tuesday in November. The morning had started ordinarily. Amara had arrived at the office at 8:50, made herself a coffee, and opened the brief for a new campaign she was working on, a rebrand project for a fitness company called Kinetic Fit, which was one of Northfield's larger accounts and carried accordingly a certain amount of internal attention. The Kinetic Fit pitch was scheduled for the following Thursday. It was a significant one. The client was considering a full brand overhaul, which, if Northfield won the pitch, would be the agency's biggest project of the year. 3 teams had been working on different elements of the presentation for 2 weeks. The creative lead was a man named Derek, the strategy lead was a woman named Priya, and the account management lead, the person who would ultimately stand at the front of the room and guide the client through everything, was Amara's direct manager, a woman named Claudette. At 10:30, Claudette held a brief team check-in in the small glass meeting room off the main floor. Amara, Derek, Priya, and a junior designer named Sam were there. Claudette walked through the status of each section. Creative was almost done. Strategy was ready. Account management slides needed one final revision. And then Claudette looked at her laptop, looked up, and said in the brisk, confident, slightly compressed way that she said most things, "I've been thinking. I actually have a conflict Thursday morning. I have to be on a call with the Vancouver office until 11, and the Kinetic Fit pitch is at 10. So Amara, I think this is actually a perfect opportunity. I'd like you to take the wheel on this one." She said it easily, naturally, as a thing that made obvious sense. Amara felt the sentence arrive. She caught the pieces. Of a conflict, Amara, perfect opportunity, take the wheel. Her brain searched quickly and silently for the full meaning of take the wheel in this context. She found wheel, a circular object, usually connected to a vehicle. Take the wheel, take hold of the wheel, drive. There was a driver analogy in there somewhere, she thought, something about being in the driver's seat. She had heard this kind of phrase before, in this kind of context, and she knew it had something to do with responsibility, with being in charge of something. She was fairly sure, mostly sure, 65% sure. And Claudette was looking at her with that brisk, expectant, slightly warm expression that meant, "I believe in you, and also I'm busy, and I need a response in the next 4 seconds." Amara smiled. "Of course," she said. "Thank you for the opportunity." "Great," she said, and made a note. "I'll send you everything you need. You'll do great." The meeting ended. People collected their things. Amara walked back to her desk. She sat down. She opened her laptop. She thought, "I have agreed to something. The question is, what?"
Amara smiled. "Of course," she said. "Thank you for the opportunity." "Great," Claudette said, and made a note. "I'll send you everything you need. You'll do great." The meeting ended. People collected their things. Amara walked back to her desk. She sat down. She opened her laptop. She thought, "I have agreed to something. The question is what?" She opened the brief again and read it from the beginning. She was going to help with the wheel section? There was no wheel section. She was going to be responsible for something that was like driving? She was going to present something? She typed, "Take the wheel meaning" into the search bar of her browser, then immediately deleted it and closed the tab, because her monitor was visible to the rest of the open plan floor, and she had a specific, practiced caution about Googling things at her desk that might reveal the gaps she was working hard not to reveal. She opened her email. There was nothing yet from Claudette. She told herself she would understand it better when Claudette's email arrived. The email would make it clear. Claudette's email arrived at noon. It said, "Amara, so glad you're up for this. I've attached the full deck. I've also noted in the team calendar that you're leading the Thursday presentation. You'll be great. Let me know if you have questions." Amara read the word leading. She read it again. She read the phrase, "You're leading the Thursday presentation" a third time, slowly, and felt something happen in her stomach that was not entirely unpleasant. It had a quality of significance to it, like the feeling of a door opening, but was also not entirely comfortable, because the door was opening into a room she had not had time to prepare for. Take the wheel. Lead the presentation. Be the person at the front of the room, guiding the client through the entire pitch for the agency's biggest potential project of the year. She sat for a moment. Then she opened the attached deck and began reading it very carefully. Over the next several days, Amara prepared. She read every slide. She learned the strategy section, which was not her usual area, well enough to explain it. She wrote out talking points. She ran through the sequence twice in her apartment on Wednesday evening, standing in front of her bathroom mirror, which she had now learned from a podcast she listened to was a time-honored tradition, and felt by the time she went to sleep on Wednesday night that she was ready. Or ready enough, or close to ready enough. Thursday morning arrived with a particular sharpness. She was at the office by 8:45. She reviewed her notes. She set up the conference room. She made sure the slides were loaded on the main screen and confirmed the clicker worked. She was, in every logistical way, prepared. The Kinetic Fit team arrived at 10, 3 people, one of whom was the client's VP of marketing, a man named Donovan Price, who had the particular energy of someone who has sat through many pitches and is calibrating this one within the first 90 seconds. Amara introduced herself. She introduced the agency. She began. And something happened that she had not fully anticipated, something that no amount of mirror rehearsal quite prepares you for, which was the experience of presenting to a real room of real people whose attention is a tangible, palpable, weighty thing. The slide she had memorized looked slightly different from the front of the room. The talking points she had practiced felt slightly further away. The questions Donovan Price asked were not the questions she had prepared answers for. She got through it. She did not get through it perfectly. There were 2 moments where she lost the thread briefly and had to find it again. There was one question about the brand strategy timeline that she answered in a way that was slightly imprecise, and Priya, sitting at the side of the room, stepped in quietly to add a clarification, which Amara received with a grateful nod and a mental note. But she got through it. The client shook hands at the end. Donovan Price said, and she recorded this sentence in her memory with the care of someone archiving something important, "Good presentation. You clearly know this account." They left. The room exhaled. Derek said, "That was solid, Amara." Priya said, "Really solid. That timeline question was tricky. You handled it well." Amara smiled, a real smile this time, not the coping mechanism version. She straightened the papers on the table and thought about Claudette's email. "You'll do great." She thought, "I didn't do great exactly, but I did do it." Claudette appeared in the doorway at 11:15, back from her Vancouver call. "How did it go?" "Good, I think." And then, because something had shifted this morning, some small thing had rearranged itself inside her, she added, "Can I ask you something? When you said take the wheel on Tuesday, I want to be honest with you. I understood you, but I wasn't completely sure exactly what you meant. I worked it out from your email, but that phrase, I want to make sure I understand it properly." Claudette looked at her for a moment. Then something in her expression softened, not with pity, but with a specific kind of recognition. "I should have been clearer," Claudette said. "Take the wheel means take the lead, be the driver, run the thing. I sometimes forget not everyone grew up with the same phrases." "I figured it meant something like that. I just wanted to be sure." "You were right," Claudette said. And then, "And for future reference, if something I say doesn't land clearly, please just ask. I'd rather spend 30 seconds explaining than have you trying to work it out alone." Amara nodded. This time, she meant it.
Okay, first of all, she did it. She got through the presentation, which she was not fully prepared for in the way she should have been, and she came out the other side. And then She asked Claudette, after the fact.
After the fact, which took a kind of courage that I think is worth acknowledging separately from the language conversation. Because asking someone to clarify something before you need to act on it is hard enough. Asking them after, when the moment is already passed, when you've already had to perform without the full information, requires admitting that there was a gap. And admitting gaps when you're trying very hard to seem competent is not easy.
And Claudette's response, I should have been clearer. She took some of the ownership herself.
Which is also important to notice because a big part of why English learners end up smiling and nodding is that they feel in some way that not understanding is a failure that belongs entirely to them. But communication is a two-way responsibility. When Claudette used a casual idiom in a quick meeting without checking whether her whole team was following, that was also a communication choice. Not a bad one, not careless, but one that had consequences.
Okay, let's talk about the phrase itself. Take the wheel. Because I want listeners to understand exactly why this is such an easy thing to miss, and also why it's so common.
Right. So, take the wheel is an idiom that comes from driving, specifically from the image of someone being in the driver's seat of a car, hands on the steering wheel, in control of where the vehicle goes. When we say take the wheel in English, we mean take control, take the lead, be the person who is responsible for guiding something from beginning to end.
And you can hear it in all kinds of contexts?
All kinds of contexts. In a meeting, I need someone to take the wheel on this project. In a creative context, you've got the best vision for this. Take the wheel and run with it. In a more casual setting, I'm exhausted. Can you take the wheel for a bit? Which in a literal sense means please drive the car. But you also hear it figuratively all the time.
And the reason Amara got stuck on it is she caught the image, she caught wheel, and she couldn't quite complete the translation in real time.
Which is an extremely logical place to get stuck. Because if you've never heard the idiom before, the word wheel is the most concrete image in the sentence, and your brain latches onto the concrete before it can access the figurative. This is what happens with idioms when they're unfamiliar. The literal meaning of the individual words creates a kind of visual noise that gets in the way of the figurative meaning.
And there are so many idioms in English that use the same driving or vehicle metaphor, right? Like it's a whole family of phrases.
It's an enormous family. English loves vehicle metaphors for leadership and responsibility. Take the wheel, be in the driver's seat, steer the ship, at the helm, navigate through something, get back on track, drive the conversation. All of these mean some version of lead, control, be responsible for the direction of something. And if you know one of them well, the others start to make intuitive sense.
Because the core image is the same, someone in control of a moving thing.
Exactly. And this is a useful strategy for learning idiom families rather than learning individual idioms. Instead of memorizing take the wheel as one isolated phrase, you can learn the whole metaphor. In English, leadership is often described as driving or steering something. Once you have that metaphor, a whole group of phrases becomes transparent.
Okay, but I want to go back to something bigger. Because the phrase, take the wheel, is the specific thing in today's story. But the larger thing, the smiling and nodding, that's what I really want to talk about. Because I think that's where the real lesson lives.
Yes, and I want to be honest about this. The smile and nod strategy, the one Amara had developed over 5 months, is not irrational. It's actually a very understandable response to a very real pressure. Because the alternative, stopping the conversation every time you're not sure about something to ask for clarification, feels, in the moment, like it would make you seem slow or unqualified, or like you're holding everyone up. So you make a quick calculation. You weigh the cost of not understanding against the cost of asking. And in that moment, asking often feels more expensive.
And most of the time, the guess is close enough and nothing goes wrong.
Right, which is why the strategy persists. It has a high success rate. 90% of the time, smiling and nodding cost you nothing. But the 10%, and it usually comes at the worst possible moment, as it did for Amara, that 10% is what today's episode is about.
So what's the alternative? Because I don't think the answer is just ask every time you don't understand. That's not realistic. That's not how conversation works.
You're absolutely right. And this is something I want to be specific about, because advice that doesn't account for the real social dynamics of conversation isn't actually useful. So let me give listeners a few concrete strategies that are more realistic than just ask. The first strategy is what I call the partial confirmation. This is for situations where you've understood most of something, but one specific part is fuzzy. Instead of a full, I don't understand, can you explain? You reflect back the part you did understand and let the gap reveal itself. Something like, so you're saying you'd like me to take on more responsibility for this presentation, is that right? This does two things. It confirms what you understood, and it gives the other person the chance to fill in any gap without you having to admit that you don't know the specific word or phrase.
Because you're not saying, I didn't understand, you're saying, let me make sure I've got this right.
Exactly, and almost everyone responds well to that. It sounds thoughtful, not confused. It sounds like you're being precise, not like you're lost.
And in Amara's situation, when Claudette said, take the wheel, she could have said something like, so you'd like me to lead the presentation, to be the main presenter?
Perfect. That's the partial confirmation done well. And Claudette would have said exactly and moved on. And Amara would have had the full, clear picture without any awkward admission.
Okay, what's the second strategy?
The second strategy is the delayed clarification, which is what Amara actually used, just in a less ideal form. The idea is if you miss something in a meeting, in a fast conversation, in a moment where stopping to ask feels disruptive, you note the specific phrase or moment and you follow up afterward, by email, in a quieter moment with the person directly. Now, Amara did this, but she waited until after she had already presented. The ideal version is doing it as soon as possible after the conversation, before any action is required. So the sequence should be smile and nod to get through the moment. Then within minutes or hours, find the phrase, look it up, or send a quick message. Hey, just want to make sure I'm clear on what you meant by take the wheel. Does that mean I'll be leading the whole presentation?
And doing it quickly is important because the longer you wait,
The harder it is to admit, because by day 3, you've had 3 days to act on whatever you understood or didn't understand, and the gap has grown.
right, Amara had days to follow up and didn't. And I understand why. She was embarrassed. She was trying to work it out alone. But the follow-up on the same day would have cost her almost nothing.
Almost nothing. A 30-second message. Quick check. I want to make sure I understood correctly. You'd like me to lead Thursday's presentation. Claudette would have replied in 2 words, and Amara would have had 5 days to prepare properly instead of piecing it together from an email.
Okay, the third strategy.
The third strategy is slightly different. It's not about what to do when you miss something. It's about building the kind of relationship with colleagues and managers where clarification doesn't feel like an admission of failure in the first place.
Oh, say more about that.
So one of the reasons the smile and nod strategy persists is because learners often feel that asking for clarification reveals a gap that will lower other people's opinion of them. But that is a much more significant fear in some workplace cultures than in others. And in most Canadian and North American professional environments, which is where Amara was, asking clarifying questions is actually a positive signal. It signals engagement. It signals that you care about doing the right thing. It signals precision.
The difference between I don't understand and I just want to make sure I've got this right.
Exactly. Those 2 sentences can mean the same thing, but they perform very differently. I don't understand sounds like a gap. I just want to make sure I've got this right sounds like a professional. And building the habit of saying the second one regularly, even when you do understand, as a way of confirming and showing engagement, normalizes it. It becomes part of how you communicate, so that when you genuinely do need clarification, it doesn't stand out. It's just what you do.
You're not hiding the times you need to ask inside the times you don't.
Yes, the clarifying question becomes a consistent communication habit, not a distress signal.
That's really smart. Let's give listeners some actual phrases they can use, the specific sentences that work in these situations, because I think having the words ready is half the battle. When you're in the moment, under pressure, if you don't have the sentence ready, your default is the smile.
Right. So let me give you 6 phrases, practical, natural, ready to use. Number 1, just to make sure I'm following, you're saying that and then restate what you understood. This is the partial confirmation we talked about. Number 2, let me make sure I've got this right before we move on. This one is particularly useful in meetings. It's assertive. It buys you time without seeming uncertain. Number 3, could you say a bit more about what that would look like in practice? This one is gold because it sounds like you understand the concept but want the detail. It gives you more information without revealing that you missed the original point.
Oh, that one is so good because it sounds engaged and thorough rather than confused.
And it usually results in the other person explaining the thing more specifically, which is exactly what you needed. Number 4, I want to make sure I'm on the same page. Can I just confirm that? Again, restating what you heard. Same page is an idiom itself, meaning we both understand the same thing, but it's common enough that most learners know it. Number 5, I may have missed part of what you said. Could you say the last part again? This is more direct, but it's completely honest and natural. People mishear things all the time. Saying you missed part of something is not a language admission, it's a human admission.
And number 6?
Number 6 is for after the fact, the delayed clarification. I've been thinking about what you said in the meeting. I just want to make sure I understand correctly. When you said X, did you mean Y? This works by email, by message, by a quick drop by at someone's desk. It's honest, it's specific, and it almost always results in a clear and generous response.
Because people don't mind being asked to clarify. Most people are happy to do it.
Most people are very happy to do it. The fear that asking will make you look bad is usually much larger inside the person asking than it is in the person being asked. From the outside, can I just confirm what you meant? Reads as conscientious. It almost never reads as incompetent.
I want to talk about something that Eliel mentioned earlier, the idiom families thing, because I think this is a really useful learning strategy that goes beyond today's specific story. Can you go through a few more of these vehicle and leadership idioms so listeners walk away with a cluster of phrases rather than just one?
Yes, and this is exactly how I'd encourage learners to build their vocabulary, not word by word, but cluster by cluster, around a central image. So we have the driving or steering cluster, which is about leadership and control. Take the wheel, be in the driver's seat, steer the conversation, drive the project forward, navigate through a challenge. All of these mean someone is responsible and in control of the direction of something. Then there's the on-track cluster, which is about progress and direction. Get back on track, stay on course, keep things moving, go off the rails, derail a plan. These are about whether things are proceeding as planned or going wrong.
And go off the rails, that's when something goes badly wrong?
Yes, if a project goes off the rails, it means it has gone completely in the wrong direction, dramatically, significantly, like a train that has left the tracks.
Which is almost a visual you can hold on to. Once you have the image of the train, the idiom makes sense.
That's exactly right, and this is one of the best tools for learning idioms. Try to find the original image. Most idioms in English came from a concrete, specific situation. Once you know what the image is, the figurative meaning becomes much easier to hold and remember, and much less likely to produce that moment Amara had, where the word wheel appeared in front of her, and she couldn't complete the path from the image to the meaning.
Okay, let me ask you one more thing because I think it's important and slightly different from everything we've covered. We've been talking about strategies, what to do instead of smiling and nodding, but I want to acknowledge something. Sometimes you're going to smile and nod anyway, even knowing all of this, even with all 6 phrases memorized, because the situation doesn't allow for a pause, because the power dynamic makes asking feel genuinely risky, because you've got 60% of it and the stakes of that specific question are low enough that the guess is fine.
Yes, and that's a realistic thing to say.
So for those moments, and I think everyone has them, what's the minimum viable version of the strategy, the lowest effort safety net?
The minimum viable safety net is this. After the meeting, immediately, not that evening, not the next morning, immediately, write down what you weren't sure about, the specific phrase, the specific moment. Then do one of 2 things. Either look it up yourself Or send one quick message to someone you trust in that office, a colleague, not necessarily your manager, and say, "Hey, quick question. When Claudette said take the wheel in the meeting, she meant I'm leading the presentation on Thursday, right?"
And that message costs almost nothing to send.
It costs almost nothing, and it closes the gap before the gap becomes a problem.
The gap before the gap becomes a problem? That's the whole episode in one sentence, honestly.
That might be the episode tagline.
Let's bring it home. Clean summary for everyone.
All right, 3 big things from today. First, take the wheel means to take the lead, to be in control and responsible for guiding something from start to finish. It comes from the driving image. The person with their hands on the steering wheel is the person deciding where everything goes. Use it naturally and you'll sound fluent. I'd like you to take the wheel on this campaign. She took the wheel and ran the entire meeting. Second, the smile and nod strategy is understandable, but its real cost is invisible and cumulative. Every time you don't clarify, the gap grows. The solution is not to ask about everything, but to build one simple habit. After any conversation where something landed unclear, follow up quickly with a specific question framed as, "I just want to make sure I've got this right." That framing is professional, not apologetic. Third, learn idioms in families, not alone. When you find an idiom about leadership and control, look for its cousins. Take the wheel, be in the driver's seat, steer the project, navigate the challenge, go off the rails. All of these mean someone is responsible and in control of the direction of something.
And the 6 phrases? The real, ready-to-use sentences are, just to make sure I'm following, let me make sure I've got this right. Could you say a bit more about what that would look like in practice? I want to make sure I'm on the same page. I may have missed part of what you said. And the follow-up, I've been thinking about what you said. When you said X, did you mean Y?
6 phrases. Any one of them would have saved Amara 5 days of quiet uncertainty.
And she still got through it.
She still got through it. And then she did the bravest thing. She went and asked after the fact, when asking was harder, which tells you something about who Amara is.
It really does. Okay, we have arrived at our favorite part of the episode, the part where we hear from you.
Because today's topic, the smile, the nod, the of course, absolutely, that comes out before your brain has fully processed what just happened, this is one of the most universal experiences in second language learning.
And we genuinely believe that every single person listening right now has a story that lives in this territory. So here's our question for you this week. Have you ever smiled and nodded through something in English or in any language and only found out later what it actually meant? What happened? Maybe you agreed to something you didn't expect. Maybe you showed up to something you didn't know you'd signed up for. Maybe you laughed at a joke you didn't fully understand and only understood the punchline 3 hours in the shower.
We want to hear it all, and we especially want to know, what did you do when you figured it out? Did you ask someone, like Amara eventually did? Did you quietly research it and never tell anyone? Did you somehow make it through without anyone noticing the gap?
Or, and this one is for our braver listeners, is there something you have been smiling and nodding through for a while that you're still not completely sure about? Write it in the comments. I promise you, someone else is nodding at exactly the same thing and will be incredibly relieved to see it named.
Because the most powerful thing about this community, and we mean this every time we say it, is how honest it is. People come here and tell their real stories, their real gaps, their real moments of confusion. And every time they do, someone else reads it and thinks, that was me too. And something small shifts. Something that felt like a private failure becomes a shared experience.
Which is what language learning actually is. Not a private test, a shared journey.
A shared journey with a lot of vehicle and steering metaphors, apparently.
So many vehicles. Okay, that is our episode. Thank you so much, everyone, for spending this time with us today.
Keep asking, keep clarifying, and if you find yourself reaching for the smile, just take a breath first and see if one of those 6 phrases fits instead.
And if the smile happens anyway, that's okay too. Just follow up quickly.
Close the gap before the gap closes you.
See you in the next story.
See you in the next story.